So, great start. So, yeah, I'm Sam. I was Rowan Sane online. This is my third or fourth video for No Man's Sky. The first couple were streams. I grabbed a little 5-minute clip just for Facebook. This is my third video particularly intended to be on YouTube for No Man's Sky. Anyway, none of that matters. What I'm here to do is try and put a few of my thoughts together while I run around exploring this brand new planet, which I have called Aphrodite, 1982. I'm not sure why. Or at least there's a long and rambling thought process involved that I'm not going to explain right now. It has to do with stuff. Anyway, this has gone really well so far, because you're obviously clear on all my thoughts about the game. I'm not going to need all 15 minutes. Oop, my life support is low, so I'm going to talk a bit about the game while I run around playing it at the same time. It's a nice, safe looking planet based on the original stats I've seen for it, so I will throw a power canister into my life support system, which I do by going charge, and I can charge up with any of those things. I'm going to use this, hold down the button, charged. On a friendly planet that should last a long time. I was running around on an airless moon and I ran out much more quickly. At least I think it was airless. There's no hazard here on Aphrodite. The temperatures are colder than I thought. It's a jungle planet. I was fooled by the fact that it's a jungle planet into thinking it would be a warm jungle planet. Obviously not. So there we are. We'll start with that. The worlds. This is the first really, I don't know, this is a brighter, more colourful world than most I've been to so far, but I have seen lots of life. Now this world, I've literally just touched down. The Sentinel's come to say hello. That's a Sentinel, and I haven't explored anything or named anything. I do see a giant rock of something over here. Anyway, I had a whole bunch of ideas about what I was going to say during this video, and it's not really coming out in any great hurry. This is something called emerald. It's neutral, which means it's not classed as any of the, I guess, the three, well, the resources you gather seem to be classed into oxides, silicates, and isotopes. Some things are labelled neutral. So I guess it's 4 groups, so I've been thinking of it as 3. Just carve a little bit of that off. Demonstration and sale. So the game, my first impressions, I'm enjoying it. It is quite slow paced most of the time. I awoke, as I suspect all players do, on a world next to a crashed life ship, or escape shuttle I guess, and some bits and pieces of cargo, rubble and whatnot, on a world where there was happened just coincidentally to be all the materials I would need to escape the world. I suspect that was also built in. I don't think I've actually been to a world that doesn't have carbon, iron and plutonium on it in some degree, and those are your 3 basic building blocks. So when someone says, what do you do in No Man's Sky? The most simple summary is run around looking for carbon and plutonium. Plutonium because without it you can't fuel your launch thrusters on your ship, and once your launch thrusters are empty you cannot take off. Kind of self-explanatory, but you get about 4 shots. 25% is used up each time from a fully fueled thruster, so you don't just fly around taking off, landing, taking off, landing, taking off, landing. I suppose you could, because there's plutonium everywhere, but the world that I awoke on, which I named Crusoe, in the first look star system, where we are no longer hanging out, was a toxic world, which meant that there was acid rain, I think. It was always raining, and I was taking slow damage to my hazard protection, and then underneath that you've got your health, so I never took health damage from it, because it was quite gentle. And if you can't find a cave, you find one of these big rocks of minerals, you carve a hole into it, like I did there, and you can jump in, and suddenly your suit is stabilizing. If you are in toxic rain, you're no longer, it's recovering its hazard protection. If you are in extremely hot or extreme cold, this seems to provide some shelter. The definition of shelter seems to be something directly overhead so that no part of you is exposed vertically on a vertical plane to the sky. It doesn't seem to matter what the hazard is, that's how it works. Makes less sense for cold or heat, but it could still be argued that it gives your suit enough local insulation space or something. Anyway, the game is not utterly realistic, as you can see, looking at all those colours. Man, too much prog rock and acid. The 70s, man. I was only born in the 70s. It wasn't how I lived in the 70s, but anyway. All the while the life support is ticking down, but you need carbon or various other things to fuel your life support. Carbon is the cheapest fuel support. It's the type I've found for things that can be fueled by any isotope. Carbon is the lowest value one, except to the sentinels, who seem to come along and look at you if you burn down too many trees. And if they look at you too many times, they get cross and start shooting at you, and then you run for your ship or a building to hide until they leave you alone, or fight back and claim the titanium from their bodies that I haven't found anywhere else yet. So that's going to be interesting down the line. I found an aluminium asteroid in space yesterday. Anyway, what am I going to do on this planet? Doesn't really matter because it's mainly here to provide backdrop while I talk. So, minerals, yes. It's a weird looking thing. I wonder what. It doesn't look friendly actually. So running around for carbon and plutonium is the core activity. It's the one thing you can rely on saying you will be doing at any given play session, at least until we get much bigger inventories. The ship inventories are small. I can actually show you that from here. It's the exosuit. It is nearly full up. All those blue ones in the corner are either essential items or upgrades because they use up inventory slots. And all the other colours stuff, we've got thalmium 9, carbon, iron, emerald, and a Viking dagger. Trade commodities which you can only sell as far as I know. You can probably buy them one place and sell them another place, or you find them in loot and sell them. Each one takes up its own. If trade commodities stacked with each other, if I find another Viking dagger, it'll sit there, and then another one would sit there, and that's it. My inventory's full, even though it's 3 daggers. And this is a great big pile of carbon. So, if the artifacts or the trade commodities stacked, because you find quite a few of them and they're good money, you want to keep them, but they each use up an entire slot. And my suit has 15 slots. And my spaceship has 16 slots. That's the infamous pre-order spaceship. The spaceship that can break the game. Because it actually can. If you claim it too early, I'm just going to say, thank you, Brent, at this point. I hope you listen to this at some point. Thank you, Brent. If you had not told me while I was playing that first evening, by the way, I'm seeing online that you shouldn't claim your spaceship until after you've learned how to build a hyperdrive, even though your spaceship has a hyperdrive, because that's what causes it to break. It's like, ooh, pre-order spaceship, you get a hyperdrive before anyone else. But it's possible to wind up in a situation where you don't have a hyperdrive and don't know how to build one. And I don't just mean you don't know how because the player hasn't been taught, collect this and that, assemble them in such and such a way. You can work that out from learning how to build other stuff. You don't have the plans for a hyperdrive. Because a thing that they chucked into oh yes, part of that starting thing, the experience that I suspect that every player has pre-programmed, because it's procedurally generated, but not everything is procedurally generated. Plot items can be plonked down in assigned locations within that procedurally generated world. So every player is going to have a piece of rubble that clues them into the existence of the atlas, and a tutorial message that will pop up telling them to scan their surroundings, and lo and behold there'll be a building of some sort that they need to go, that they can go and investigate if they choose, and when they do they will get the plan for how to build a hyperdrive. But if you already have a hyperdrive, it doesn't do that, so you don't get the plan. And then you have to rely on somehow finding the plan elsewhere, and if you wind up in a solar system with no hyperdrive and only a chance of a randomly found hyperdrive chart instead of an intentionally placed hyperdrive chart with quest pointer, it could take a long time to find one. I'm not going to say that it may be that every system is guaranteed to have one in it. It might be one of the rules that the procedural generation uses, because it's not random, it's generated according to a set of rules, using random functions in the process. So, yeah, if you trade this ship that gave you a free hyperdrive for a ship that doesn't have one, for example, apparently it can happen, apparently it has happened to a couple of people so far, which has led to a potential answer to a question I've been having, which is, I cannot find any way of restarting the game at square one if I decide I want to play through the beginning again. Pay more attention to some of the dialogue that maybe, or three paths are a bit mysterious, and maybe I'd like to try and see how something else plays out. But there's no simple new game function built into this interface. This is unusual, and it also has in common with itself the fact that the in-game characters interface and the players interface, while looking somewhat different, use the same mousy system and the same sort of fonts and everything, so it feels like even the options screen is part of the character's interface with the world, not just the player's interface. I suspect the plot may have something to do with things like that. I still have a certain amount of money, theoretical money, invested in the black hole or related dimensional entrapment storyline. That this whole galaxy may be the entire black hole. You get to the centre, you learn about this great gaping cosmic wound in the fabric of the universe. As the prose is inclined to describe things in big flowery purple phrases like that, much more than that was kind of off the cuff, but it's talked about wounds in the fabric of space-time and bloody evisceration and things, so the prose is very pulp sci-fi or pulp novel in general, which fits a bit with the prog rock / pulp sci-fi covers. I was heading somewhere, darn it. Ooh, is that a knowledge stone? That's handy. I'm going to learn a word. I've learned the geek word for beware. I've learned a lot of words that no geek I've spoken to have used in conversation yet, but I'm sure that this is going to all help things to make sense eventually. Right, I am a little bit lost now, so I'm just going to try and hop on top of that, pretend I wasn't, and scan the surroundings. So I've just had some waffling about procedural generation, which is something I was intending to include. That everyone has the same scripted content laid down over the top at the start. Learn to repair your space pod, learn to fuel your space pod, learn to travel around and to build a hyperdrive, which teaches you the blueprint concept in general. Walked up to a space station to be shown that space stations exist and you can talk to other pilots. All that sort of tutorial stuff is done in a relatively low-key way, but it does mean that you can wander off from it. And yes, this three paths thing, I sort of, at some point in the beginning I said something about, yes, I follow the Atlas. What? Okay, so apparently some point during that long drawn out ramble I was doing, I rambled right out the end of my 15 minutes and I have no idea when it cut off, so I'm just making this little piece here. Let's go look, I'm back at my ship. The sun is probably setting from the looks of that, or maybe rising. Definitely the lighting conditions have changed since earlier. And I'm going to splice this on the end of wherever I was up to in that other video. If I was in the middle of something really interesting, whoops, and unlikely if I was in the middle of something ramblingly complicated that might have been interesting if I ever got to the end of it. Also whoops, and probably a lot more likely. But in either case, if it seems worth finishing, I will come back to it next time I'm doing this, because we'll have to see how well this works out. And this will be spliced on the end. So thanks for watching if you got all the way here and didn't go, what the hell is he doing? Anyway, thanks, and watch me again if you like.